Welcome to the Crime Dawg Podcast with your host and content creator, Johnny Fiorica, who claims the microwave and Hot Pocket are the two greatest inventions known to man. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Folks, welcome back to the Crime Dawg Podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Fiorica. Sitting alongside me, my trusted co-host, David Simpson, Jason Blanchard. Folks, we got a good one for you tonight. I know we've mentioned it to each other and off the record, on the record, but we got a good one. Dr. Butler is finally here. We had some scheduling issues, mainly on our end, but she is the Director of Health and Wellness from the Monroe County Sheriff's Department. Dr. Butler, welcome to the pod.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We were so happy that you were going to come because we wanted you. When did we start talking? Like February, March?
It was a while ago. It was cold, for sure.
It was cold, right?
Yeah.
And then it was February, March. Then we had you on the books. Then we took you off the books. Then we had issues. Mainly, it was 95% Crime Dawg. So we appreciate you sticking with us and coming by. Finally, thank you. Doc, what we usually like to do, especially in your instance, because we're going to talk about mental health and a lot of doctoring stuff tonight. Could you give our audience and our listeners a background relative to your education and your employment and stuff like that?
Sure. So I grew up in Baltimore City, and the only college I applied to was the U of R. It was U of R or bust. So luckily I got in. So I went to the U of R, and then I also got a master's at the U of R right after in human development. And my first job with that master's degree was at the psychiatric emergency department. I figured just throw yourself right in there with people in crises. I frickin' loved it. And then from there, I kind of danced around. I went to an outpatient clinic, a walk-in crisis service, the jail, the VA, got a second master's degree in social work. I developed a love for working with cops, specifically when I was working at the jail at Livingston County. And then I came back and worked for the Office of Mental Health for 10 years, developed the forensic intervention team, and was the liaison for law enforcement locally. And 2020 really shifted my focus completely. So for 24 years, I was focused in the community. Folks in the community deserve all the services that we have to offer them. But 2020 threw our world into a tailspin, and it really taught me that I wanted to do an about face and put 100% of my effort in law enforcement, because you can't give what you don't have. And law enforcement didn't really have any mental health specific services. So in 2021, I started my own business, Blue Line Wellness, and then also had the luxury of joining the sheriff's office in 2021 too.
Well, that's awesome, because I'll tell you, and I know I sound like an old timer, but these guys have, I did 30 years, obviously, with the RPD. Jason's on. He's going on his 25th. David did 20 with us. He's been retired for some time. So back when we came on, I laugh, but it's not funny. It was, okay, you're having a problem? Come on, let's go grab a beer. Let's go sit around a campfire. Let's talk about it. It was good and it was bad. The camaraderie, the friendship, the love that we had for our brother and sister officers was definitely there. Mm-hmm. But some guys, and I want to get into the whole mental brain makeup, it wasn't good for, because we weren't helping them. We were supporting them, because there's a big difference between supporting your brothers and sisters and actually getting them help, right?
100%. Yep.
So why don't we talk about, I sent you an email today because my head was going 100 miles an hour, but what do you think the number one issue impacting police officers' mental health is today? I
really think that it's the compounding trauma, but that's kind of like a complex answer, because it's not, so they say on average cops see 188 critical incidents in their career. Those stats are from 2015. It's easily got to be 300 now. But thinking about it, since you left the field and since a co-host left, think of the difference in policing, the difference in the community. There's less cops. There's less cops seeing more critical incidents. All of that combined with, shift work, with not having good sleep, with community support really dwindling, all of that makes the same trauma that you saw in your time really even more, it really affects people more because of having less support along the way.
So you said in a normal course of a career, about 180, but you think it's more like 300, a cop has witnessed or experienced critical incidents, 300 critical incidents over the course of their career. Define critical incident for our audience.
That's a good question, because I think a lot of times people would go right to officer-involved shooting or a stabbing, or when you have to fire your firearm, even if the subject doesn't pass away. If there's a fatal accident, especially with kids, everything with kids is so much worse. But if you think about it, you never know what's critical for someone else. You could go to the death of a 90-year-old, and some may say, well, they had a really good long life, but you just lost your grandma. And that death of a 90-year-old to you is critical and leaves it so you can't sleep and eat and function. So we never really know what's critical, which is why I think the numbers are even higher than probably estimated in 2015.
Sure, it's definitely a sliding scale because it's totally subjective depending on the viewer, right?
Absolutely.
So it depends on the viewer and the person that's taking in that critical incident. That is the police officer, our brothers and sisters that are out there. So do you think relative to factors, so we said, what do you think the number one issue is impacted today? You say it's compounding, because it's almost like, when you say compounding, it's like going to a bad car accident on Monday, seeing an infant death on a Tuesday, and then monthly and then yearly. So you're saying it just compounds. So you think that is a major issue for mental wellness for cops, right?
It is. And thinking about when you were going through the academy and folks would really drink it down or stuff down their responses to things, that's what got cops through for years. That's why we're losing cops by the same token, whether it's heart attack or suicide. So the best analogy that I can think of that I give to recruits in the academy is the analogy of the sponge. Have you ever heard the analogy of the sponge? All right. So if you think about it, everybody's got a sponge, right? You wash your car with a sponge, big yellow sponge. Your brain's essentially the same thing. So when any sponge, even the best sponge, gets you a little water, it can suck it all up. Eventually, that sponge, even the expensive ones, are going to leak all over the place. Your brain's essentially the same way. You can't choose the direction that you leak, whether that's curse or really just not be a nice individual or really kick the wall or just really be an asshole. You can't choose that. But all of us, every single day, have more stuff that's going in our brain and absorbing in our sponge, the good stuff and the bad stuff. So unless we, as cops and as humans, can figure out what you can do every single day to wring out that sponge in your brain, you're not going to make it through this career. So in fact, at the academy, we give recruits little sponges to put in their lockers as a visual. I tell them I do locker inspections. I don't tell them. But as a visual to think about every day, I want you to do something to wring out your sponge, walk the dog, sing a song in the shower, go to the gym, something to kind of decompress, or you're going to really leak just the same way that sponge does.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jay. You got a question?
Well, it was, you had talked about the critical incidents. And I've heard kind of something similar to the same stat. And I've also heard it compared. Now, I want to be careful because I don't ever want to diminish our brother and sisters in the military who've served in active duty or in combat or anything like that. That's not my intention. My dad was a Vietnam vet, and so was my father-in-law. And I have nothing but respect for people in the military. And I've heard people make the comparison or the analogy that, that when you deploy and you're overseas, you're in that, right? And you're there and you're involved for a year, whatever your deployment is. And then you come back. And when you're at work, when you're in law enforcement for 20 years or 30 years, and you go to work every day, you really never leave that sort of cycle. And you don't get and again, I'm not trying to compare, working in the city of Rochester to being in Fallujah, but the difference or the similarities are somewhat there. But you're there for the duration of your career. So you never get to come back. Is kind of, you're just there the whole time, if that makes sense.
It does.
And I don't know if that's a fair comparison or if it's, like apples to oranges.
I think it probably is pretty fair, because if you think about it, everything that they see overseas, my father-in-law is also a Vietnam vet, their mission can be tragic and critical from beginning to end. But their mission is that consistently for their deployment, from what I've been told. Here for law enforcement, you're on a 4-2 wheel. You work you're mandated for overtime. And then in your off time, you're taking your kid to soccer and you're making dinner and you're going grocery shopping. The brain isn't made to switch gears all the time, but that's exactly what we expect law enforcement to do. Be a loving father, be endearing, be empathetic, roll on the floor with your puppy and, play ball, and then put on all of your tools and go out and defend the citizens of it. The brain's not made like that to go back and forth.
That's a great point. I guess, as you say, when the mission is over and your deployment ends, you come back and you're kind of It might be a hard transition.
Absolutely.
For some, it might be easy, but you try to make that transition. But when you're at work every day and you go home and you go to bed, you get up and you're back with your family,
Mhm.
and you see some of the tragedies that you inevitably see in this line of work. It's a different sort of coping that goes with that when you have to interact with, quote unquote, normal people on a day-to-day basis in your circle, and
Absolutely.
then you go back to work.
And I think sometimes it's hard. You have to manually make the shift, like a manual transmission, where it's much easier said than done. But I tell a lot of law enforcement, when you leave, when you take off that vest and that uniform, you have to sometimes be able to tell yourself, I'm a dad now. Your kids, your family, they need 100% of you, not what's left at the end of the day, right? And sometimes I think you literally have to tell yourself that. And then as soon as you get all your gear in your duty bag and you head out that door, you got to switch gears again manually to get in that mindset for community policing. And it's, again, the brain's not made for that all by itself.
Yeah, I'm rarely, as Johnny and David know, I'm rarely at a loss for words, and it's it's a lot to take in, right? It's a lot to take in, and our guys and girls do it day in and day night, and nobody's asking for sympathy and a pat on their back, but when someone way more articulate than us is able to make those points, it resonates, right? I don't think you can do this job and not sit here and kind of shake your head in agreement with what you're saying, because that's the reality of it.
Yeah, we used to say, like, if the job changes you, the job's going to change you.
Right.
And we used to say maybe 7 to 10 years down the road. What I'm seeing now is 2 to 3 years into the career. You've got another, 17 left to go, but your perspective has already changed. That's this job, which is why we need to do better right out of the starting gate to help folks to make it through the career.
Just listening to this, it's kind of fascinating because I did 22 years and I never was exposed to anyone to talk to in 22 years. And I think I've worked consistently for 22 years. I was violence and crime, it was TAC unit, then the SWAT team, and then, undercover narcotics, and then a federal task force with violent crime, and then a homicide, and then special victims with the children. And it was never even a concept that was discussed at a roll call. I mean, I was involved in officer-involved shootings where I didn't take a shot, but like smelled the gunpowder, was there, thought I was being shot at, witnessed it, like rendered aid, all that. Nothing, like no car chases, crashes, no like, hey, did you talk? Nothing. So it's just fascinating to me that now that's great that it is, but to me, it's almost a little shocking that, going back through the movies of my career and the times I'm like, oh, that probably would have been a good time to talk.
Yeah.
That would have probably been a good time to talk.
I'm gonna wring my sponge out.
Yeah. Oh, I think my sponge was dripping.
You were leaking.
Yeah. So that was just my observation.
Yeah, we're trying to make it more normal because the reality of it is lots of people make it through their career, right? All of you guys did. But the one thing that helps with seeing all this trauma is talking. But that's the one thing, no offense, none of y'all are very good at, about feelings and emotions and stuff like that. But if we can get folks talking, because it's normal to talk, we're doing it right now. If we can get folks talking, they're going to be able to make it through their career one nice big healthy piece.
Well, I think there's certainly a stigma to talking, at least in my mind initially. Like,
yes,
the first taste of it would be, what are the boys going to like?
Yep.
Am I labeled as something? Are they going to take my gun? Am I not going to be able to do this line of work anymore?
Absolutely.
So I could totally see someone, especially someone young, who's trying to make a name for themselves and move up and move into certain units. Like, that would cross my mind. So I think that would be imperative. I'm sure you guys do a great job of making it clear, but that would be my hang up.
You're absolutely right. And I think I handle it two different ways when I wear my two different hats. Through the sheriff's office, we're embedded 100%. There are 5 clinicians and me riding in cop cars, walking around in the jail, talking to folks. And it's not like in-depth therapy while you're in the cop car. The whole mission of it is to get to know the individual as a human. So on their worst day, if you know me as a human, nobody cares that I went to school. No one cares that I'm a doctor. If they can't talk to me, none of that crap really matters. So we just need to get to know people. So on their worst day, maybe they'll be more open to talk. But I think the key is that absolutely nothing is written down at all. And because we live in this great state of New York, none of us are anybody's ongoing therapist, meaning for the SAFE Act, we don't make any reports to Big Brother New York State.
All right.
Well, this is the exact conversation that we've been waiting for months to have, because we're looking to take a break right now. But I just want to say this conversation that we're having right now is exactly what I wanted this episode to be, because with all our brothers and sisters that do watch and support us, even if we were to reach one person out there that's listening to you talk, that might be able to reach out to you, because we're going to have attached on our YouTube channel and on this episode ways that our officers, our brothers and sisters, can get a hold
Wonderful.
Of mental health clinicians. So we're excited for you to be here, Doc. This is just scratching the surface. Folks, stick with us on the other side with Dr. Butler. Thanks, man. WorkAlerts.com. That's Work Alerts with a Z. Work Alerts helps retail, restaurant, hospitality operators control their labor costs and better communicate with their staff through simple, easy-to-use work scheduling and text messaging system. Set budgeted hours for your departments to prevent overscheduling, manage employee time off requests, and availability. Again, that's WorkAlerts.com. WorkAlertz.com. Labor management and employee engagement made simple. Folks, welcome back to the Crime Dawg podcast. Sitting here with Dr. Butler, Monroe County Sheriff, Director of Health and Wellness. Doc, thanks for sticking with us.
Of course.
Prior to us breaking, and if it wasn't for our producer making us look so good all the time, Danny Agnew, would you mind giving a website or a phone number or both for people that are watching? And Danny will flash it on the screen too as in post-production. Will you give us some contact info for people that are looking to get some help?
Absolutely. So at the sheriff's office, we have a 24/7 on-call phone that's answered by one of the clinicians, and the number is 585-369-5456. And then my wellness, my website for my private business is www.bluelinewellness.org. And on there, you'll find my work email for Blue Line as well as my cell phone number. Any cop can reach out anytime.
Thanks for sharing that, Doc. So we talked about critical incidents, right? We talked about that in the first segment. We talked about critical incidents, and you're 100% right, because a critical incident could be a police officer that was involved in a shooting. Either they shot their gun, didn't hit somebody, they shot their gun, hit them, shot their gun and murdered or killed them, or you had people that were standing next to the guy that shot the gun. It just doesn't have to be a critical incident defined by you shooting your pistol.
Right.
And we talked about seeing a dead baby, seeing a bad motor vehicle accident. There could be a plethora of things, because like you were saying, it's totally subjective to the viewer, to the officer, to our brothers and sisters who are watching something that could be traumatic. One of the examples that you gave, I don't know if it was when we were shooting or not, when you were talking to Jay about it, you said, yeah, a 90-year-old guy could have passed away, and someone's joking, well, he had a good run, but yet somebody in the room that was an officer could have just had their 90-year-old grandma or grandfather die. So it's totally subjective. One of the things that I want to get into, because it's one of the things that is like my pet peeve. First and foremost, I have a huge pet peeve with programs that utilize police officers that have been involved in critical incidents to then, quote unquote, counsel those who are newly involved in critical incidents. And here's why. I am a huge fan of mental wellness, and mental health, because I was on the hostage team for so many years. And I dealt with it a ton from that standpoint. And I saw that it was the professionals, the clinicians, that knew how the brains operated, where they could give the most help to those that were affected. I feel as though, and this is my personal opinion, and it's not a slam on the cops that want to lend help. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but depending on that person, is it just a powwow so they could just relive their critical incident over and over and over again, or sitting in a room and puff their chest out? Yeah, I shot a guy 10 years ago. And I mean, I kind of get it. Like, I don't like the fact that cops counsel other cops. I don't like it. I don't think it's healthy. It's nothing against those programs that are out there. I just don't think that in most instances, those cops don't have the proper training, medical training, to understand how the brain operates to help a person rewire themselves. What's your thoughts on that, Doc?
I think you're right. So I was a liaison to the sheriff's office peer support team starting in 2010, and now it's under me at the health and wellness. I think there's a purpose for trained peers within the department. A lot of times, though, I see them as like a gateway to the clinician because there is so much distrust. There is so much stigma. So maybe you talking to your peer after an incident or after anything really could really be opening of the conversation and lend support. But I think the key, though, to peer support is that linkage to clinicians, because there is a time to lick your wounds and relive that. Absolutely. We all need to do that. But if you don't move forward from that, you're going to be stuck in it. And if you get, the longer you stay stuck in that as a brain, your brain's going to live there. And that's not going to help anybody.
Yeah. And for the naysayers and for the people, I want to over clarify my point. I love the fact that we have peer support. I love the fact that they want to help out other cops. But the egomaniacs out there that think that they're actually a psychologist or a psychiatrist, that they feel as though that they're qualified to take somebody over the finish line, it's just not the case. I mean, I've seen it over the course of my years. It just does not work. And I see people just kind of perpetuating. They feel like they're going around in a circle. I've talked to some guys like, yeah, they sent me here, they sent me there. But what I really needed was I needed to talk to a stranger that was someone that understood how my brain worked. And this came from guys that were involved in critical incidents that trusted me enough to talk to me about it. The peer support is great. And I think that's exactly where it ends. If they are used as a conduit to get you to the psychologist or the psychiatrist or somebody that is a mental health clinician, I'm all for it. But for it to stop at that point, I can't do that. I'm not going to get on board with that.
I absolutely agree. I mean, we want to help people, right? And it's not just helping people relive. We need to help people heal. And in order to move forward, a lot of times people truly need treatment to process what happened. And unfortunately, you're likely not going to get that unless you're working with someone that's trained.
Yeah, and I said it for years too. If you, for example, one incident we had several years ago, I'm not going to get into it, like 11 guys were affected. Like I think almost 11 guys shot their guns, right? If you lined up all 11 of them in this room, to the layperson, to any of our listeners or our viewers, they would always pick out the kid that looked like a bodybuilder and said, I bet you he's not affected at all by this. Look, he's got a 32-inch waist, he's got a 50-inch shoulders, he's an animal. And then you got the kid standing right next to him, looks like Mr. Peepers with a pocket protector. He's not affected by it, but muscle guy is. You know, people think they know what's going on in between the two ears of the cop. But at the end of the day, cops put on facades.
Yep.
They put on facades because it's a male-driven, testosterone, egotistical frat house. And I love all that because I was a part of all that. But not when it comes to mental health. Not when it comes to helping out my brothers and sisters that need it. Because even though I know that I was a different type of a patrolman, an undercover detective, I know, but I always wanted to reach out to those. I had a soft spot for those who I felt were struggling. And I have instances throughout my career where I have helped out people on the side because I was worried about them. I just saw things in their eyes that weren't right.
Yep.
And I picked up on it, and I would always have conversations when everybody left the room, when everybody left their locker room for the night. And I would talk to them, pull them aside, and try to get them to help. Because, like I said, it affects everybody differently. You know? Absolutely.
Yeah, someone earlier today that reached out for help told me I hide it well.
Yeah.
Big, strong, tough guy. I mean, he looks like an action figure. Like you were going to go to Target and buy some. And he does. He hides it well. Nobody knows how much he's struggling, but it doesn't mean he's not struggling.
Right.
And to me, for someone that knows that's their outward facade, to ask for help, that's even more impressive. I'm so impressed. I don't think he's weak. I think he's so unbelievably strong because people really are not expecting he's ever going to call.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, my and I've said this, I started saying it towards the end of my career, but my family and my friends constantly have said, we know what his job is. We just don't know what he does. And that was me doing it for several reasons, but I just never talked about anything. And I wasn't one of those guys that was hiding things and was like drinking a case of beer in my basement every night to deal with it. I was never one of those guys. It's just like, okay, this is my job, almost like an NFL guy. Okay, I scored a touchdown, boom, see, now I'm going back to the bench. I take a shower, I go home, play with my kids. I was very fortunate, and I don't know how my brain is wired that way. I can't figure it out. I do know that a lot of guys that I hang out with, and we've had discussions, they're wired the same way. And there's nothing wrong with that either. There's nothing wrong with guys that are able to do it. One of the things, my daughter, when she was younger, she looked up at me. I was putting her to bed and she said, how come you never talk about your job? And she was so little and she didn't understand it. And I'm going to mess this word up bad. So Doc, you're going to have to save me. I learned it years later. I said it to her, not the word, but I explained it. It's called compartmentalization.
Mm-hmm, you got it.
Okay. Did I hit it? Okay. What I said to her was I opened up a drawer for her. And I said, honey, when I go to work, I open up the drawer. I said, but when I come home, my work drawer gets closed and I open up the family drawer. And she was like 10, 9 or 10. And she looked at me, she goes, oh, okay. And that was a visual, simplistic explanation for me to give to her.
It worked.
And she understood it and it worked. But in my head, that's kind of the way I did it. I compartmentalized things and said, okay, I'm walking through the door now. The ghetto, the hood that's behind me right now. And now I have my family. I'm home. Thank God.
Yep.
So do you deal with guys that struggle with that compartmentalization, or guys and girls?
I do. And I think it's made worse by we don't have enough cops on the street. So the mandates and the staying extra, and who doesn't like overtime, right? So picking up extra shifts, it makes it harder. When that work drawer is out in your analogy for even longer, it makes it hard to close it up. And the family drawer sometimes seems like it's stuck closed because you're not with them too much. So I think that's where I think the problem is getting worse for law enforcement right now. It's hard to shift back and forth between those.
Because of the amount of hours that they're working?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And the amount of hours that folks are working made worse by the sleep. You all know it, working all the different shifts. You're called in, there's crises, there's all sorts of incidents. That's when your brain needs time to really process what happened and file it away. But if you never get the sleep, that processing's not happening. And all those incidents are just front and center in front of you.
Right.
And I think that, and I'm not, and I want to make sure that I preface this. I'm not speaking about my experiences relative to this statement. I'm talking in generalities. Mental health has become somewhat important nationwide, right? And it's been taught at in-services, and it's been talked about at academies and everything else, right? And this has become, within the last, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years that it's kind of come up onto the radar. But, we say these things that they're important, and then, we take these officers working, on the streets or wherever, and we take their snow globe. I'd like to use a snow globe analogy, and we shake it up and we say, okay, we need you in for warrants. We need you in late. We're holding over, vacation denied, no single days off, no this, no that. And you're denied for this school that might have got you off the road for a week, and you're gonna have to work the 4th of July weekend or whatever it is. So, we kind of talk out of both sides of our mouth. We say it's important, but is it really important? Because at the end of the day, the mission's still got to get accomplished. We have to have car beats filled. We have to have men and women out there taking calls for service. And that doesn't stop, right? It's not like the 9 to 5, where you can say, all right, well, you know what? We had half the platoon call in today. We'll just make do. Mm-hmm. That doesn't happen because days gets held over, or midnights gets ordered in early, or whatever it might be, right? It's tough. It's a balancing act. And David and Johnny know I still love my job. I do. I've got 25 in, and if I didn't like it, I'd retire tomorrow.
That's awesome.
I still enjoy what I do. And it's primarily because, honestly, the men and women I work with. Mm-hmm. If I couldn't go to work and have good interactions, I'd probably retire tomorrow, right? Because it's not worth going to work and being miserable. Yeah. The mental health is important, but we don't always follow up with when the rubber meets the road with saying that this is what we're going to do to ensure that it's important, right? Because, somebody's got a wedding they need to go to, or somebody's got a graduation party and that day gets denied. That's dejecting, that weighs on people. So, it's that balancing act, I think.
I think you're right. So it was in 2019 that it changed in New York State where officer wellness had to have a component for police agencies to be accredited. And I think a lot of agencies have told me across the state they feel like it's a checkbox because you can say that you have OAP or EAP, depending on your agency, and peer support, box checked, but it's not really an actually truly developed, utilized program.
And do you think that's because they just don't know how to do it yet and they're learning and it's a huge learning curve?
I honestly do. It is new. It is completely new to actually have embedded clinicians utilize clinicians. But as I tell chiefs across the state, how you spend your money dictates where your priorities are. And if you're not willing to spend money on officer wellness, then it's not important and you're checking the box. And I can't be part of that charade. So check the box, but it's not going to be involving this girl over here. If it's actually important and your officers are important, you're going to spend money.
Is there federal funding, Doc, for agencies that try to get accredited that say, hey, you know what? Here we are, we're trying to get accredited, and they just don't check the box, or they just put it up there to get accredited? Are there places that say, oh, geez, we don't really have it in the budget, unfortunately?
COPS or community-oriented policing, they have a yearly grant. I think it's like 20 or 30,000. So it's not that much. It's for a 2-year program. But honestly, again, 20, 30,000, better than nothing. So that could be a way to start a program. New York State has new funding that's going to be available. So I think it's starting. Maybe it was one of those unfunded mandates like we like to do. But realistically, there needs to be money to back it. You can't say that you support officers and you want people to utilize programs. What programs?
Yeah.
Like what time? Like what clinicians?
Folks, stick with us. We got a lot more to talk about with Dr. Butler. She is the Monroe County Sheriff, Director of Health and Wellness.
Yeah, there we go.
It's right on my paper. Stick with us on the other side, folks. Thanks. Asher Beverages, the Rock's leader in old style homemade lemonade. It's Asher's secret recipe, so don't bother asking. If you're looking to impress, want to be one of the cool kids, and be the hit at your next party, bring one of Asher's delicious drink concoctions with you. Asher Beverages old style homemade lemonade is the way to go. Asher Beverages are available at all local retail outlets. Folks, welcome back to the Crime Dog Podcast. Johnny Furica, my co-host David Simpson, and Jason Blanchard sitting alongside us tonight. Dr. Butler, Monroe County Director of Health and Wellness. Doc, we've talked about a lot of heavy issues tonight, exactly the way the direction I thought this podcast was going to go. One of the things, and I know relative to me in my mental health, getting through things, I was lucky. I had a really great support system around me. I had not only family that cared about me, but my 3 main buddies growing up, Louie, Aaliyah, and Paulie, I've been friends with them since we were 13, 14 years old, still friends to this day. I know when I was having shitty times throughout my life, it didn't have to just be with work, because I know we're focusing on our brothers and sisters and the police officers and critical incidents, things like that. But cops also are human beings too.
Yeah.
We sometimes have shitty lives outside of our job that we have to deal with, in addition to seeing everybody on their worst day when we go to work. But I had a great support system around me. And I know that is not afforded to everybody. People don't have support systems in relationships like my 3 buddies that I had. Because I remember being a kid, in my early 20s, whatever, maybe having a shitty day at work, or I always felt like the job never bothered me. It was the bosses and the chiefs that were the biggest assholes. Yeah. And I hated those guys. And they made your life a living hell. And I was just a young kid, I remember, not getting schools, not getting jobs that I wanted, being blackballed. That was the shit that pissed me off, And I remember going out, hanging out with my buddies, and just being with them was a great reprieve for me, kind of a channel changer. But what do you say to the brothers and sisters out there that don't have a channel changer, that don't have that support system that I was lucky enough to have? What do we do for those people?
I think all too often when folks become a cop, maybe you're a little bit different. It's the job and only the job, the people, the friends outside of law enforcement that they had before the job, a lot of times they fall by the wayside. We need those people to kind of ground us, right? Because people that don't only see the terrible things every day and can shoot the shit about the good things that you don't get to see in your line of work, we need that to kind of counterbalance, kind of like a seesaw, because I'm old. But for folks that don't have that, I think the conversation has to continue, because just because you don't have it right now doesn't mean you're never going to have it. You know, if you like basketball, like maybe having a pickup basketball league, there's a whole bunch of law enforcement right now that are playing volleyball in their off time. We all need to be able to find our people wherever our people are to develop those friendships, because without being able to counterbalance the job, it does become everything, which can consume your brain and that negative thinking.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, one night I was in the academy, and I remember it was literally like the first week, and a shitty instructor, a cop, was up there, old timer, and he did the old tough guy. Look around the room. Whatever friends you have now outside this place, these are your friends now. Like some dumb speech like that. And I remember thinking about my three buddies, like I'm never going to leave these guys. I'm never going to not be friends with them. And I think that grounded me, like you said. And I think that helped me get through a lot of shitty times in my life, both personally and professionally. One of the things that we talked about off camera, Jay brought it up. I want to get into the divorce rates with cops. Cops not being the best of husbands and or wives. Could you discuss a little bit about the divorce rates?
Absolutely. I mean, the job, like I mentioned before, it's not if the job's going to change you, it's when. And when the job changes you, it changes your perspective. It changes your inability to flip-flop between work John and home John. Eventually, it's all the time turned on to work John, where the same way that on the job, it may be completely functional to question everything someone's saying because everyone's lying to you, right? And asking so many questions, that's generally not going to work so well to your wife, your girlfriend, your husband, whoever. It's not going to work so well at home. But when you can't turn it off and on, unfortunately, the job takes over home, which no doubt impacts a lot of, the divorce rate being higher for law enforcement. I think where we need to do better in law enforcement as a system and with clinicians, we need to do better working with families. Not that it's going to make your husband or wife, any less problematic, but you need to be able to understand that this job is going to change you. You need to be able to understand maybe your loved one, when they come home, they need 20 minutes not to answer your questions and just give them that time to manually shift their brain from work to home. There's some things that I think we can do a better job of with families that over time, maybe that divorce rate won't be as high as it is right now.
Well, my co-host over there has made several comments over several episodes, which is one of the reasons why he had retired, was because he said he was, David, obviously gamer, undercover, work crazy hours, murder unit, homicide, child abuse, rip and running years for decades. And then all of a sudden, his comment, he says it all the time, is he didn't want to work so much and be Uncle Dave when he got home.
It's true. My kids, when I was in homicide, there was a joke in our house that Uncle Dave's home. So it put in perspective that it might be time, if I could afford to do it, to walk away. I wanted to go back though. One quick question. For those that are in the line of work still, I never had a moment where I felt like I was depressed or I was suicidal or anything like that. What are the signs that someone should take inventory that they may have an issue? You know what I'm saying? Like,
I do.
Because when I look back on my career, one of the things that I always say that wasn't normal, and I didn't know it wasn't normal at the time, was paranoia. Like, I had a ton of paranoia, even amongst other cops, especially when I worked undercover, and especially when I was in the narcotics unit. For some reason, like, if I saw someone at a grocery store, I remember there's times I went out to dinner and I saw someone, that was in the drug game, that I would be like, are they following me? Or like tables getting turned on me? Or if a cop was asking questions, I'd be like, is he trying to get me in trouble? Like, I was just very paranoid. So that was the only time that I was like, looking back, like I could say a red flag. I don't know if that was anything, but it wasn't normal. Certainly not how I am now.
But realistically, that paranoia, as you say, or I would say hypervigilance, that kept you alive while you were out there. So you needed that while you were out there on the job. The problem is you don't need that at Wegmans, but you can't switch it off. It just becomes your norm. So you see everything through that same lens that everybody out there is out to get me, lying to me, everything.
Yeah. So what would you say are the things that people should look for? Are there, I don't know, red flags or
there are
warning signs, like to get ahead of it before you're at the point where you want to eat your gun, so to speak?
Yeah. And you know what? 8 people called me last week with their gun in their hand to their head. So it happens way more often than anybody thinks in this community.
What just happened in Charlotte, North Carolina today? Guy had his gun on duty.
Yep. And the way, so I'll get into suicide in just a second, but I think all too often, because it's your norm, it's how you see the world, you may not yourself see it in yourself as much as you can looking back. But I think that's where we need to rely on the people around us who know us best. Some of the best referrals I've gotten have been from someone saying, Kim, he's just not as clean showered and he just doesn't talk to us much. He doesn't go out to lunch anymore. And that was something he did every day, every shift. That officer didn't notice anything different about it. But his folks reached out and he was depressed. He was depressed because he was shut. His brain was completely stuck in work mode. He couldn't flip back and forth anymore. So I think we need to take stock in the people that know us. But if you yourself, I think if your sleep is getting worse, if you're drinking more to fall asleep, I think that's a problem. If you're noticing yourself, some of the things that you were just saying, the things that are so functional on the job, looking behind you all the time and second guessing everything, sometimes your loved ones are going to notice, like, what the hell? Why are you asking me the same question 3 times? I already answered that. Maybe they're not being a bitch. Maybe there's a reason why they're asking those questions. So I think we need to kind of take stake in people that are asking us those questions around us. You may not recognize it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's funny though, because we've all been accused of it, and I still do it. It's like we're out at a bar, and someone will say something like, "Oh yeah, I don't know, like that guy looks like a little creep. He's got a red shirt on." I'm like, "Oh, the guy with the red shirt, his buddy's got the yellow baseball hat on." And then I start naming all the people that are around him, and I have my back to him. And like, "How did you see that?" I can't shut that off. It's not a superpower. They do the same thing. My brothers and sisters do the same thing. That's something that when you do it for so long, I remember especially working undercover and doing cases, being in houses and stuff, you get, it's not paranoia, it's hypervigilance. I like that word because it kept me safe.
Yeah,
it still keeps me safe. And I think it's important though that people are aware of their surroundings, and I think it's very important that situational awareness, I think more people, even civilians, we call civilians non-cops, but even them being out there, I think they need to read books on that to understand your surroundings, to keep yourself safe. We never as cops shut it off on or off duty, especially when we're with our families. It's just something that I know I could never, I still don't shut it off, but that was just a quirk of mine. But getting back to, you were talking about the officer that might need a half a bottle of vodka or a 6-pack of beer just to calm himself down or herself down to get through the night or just to go to sleep. I got concerns about that, right? Because I worry about substance abuse. We have had multiple suicide cops, officers that took their lives over the course of my 30-year career. We have alcoholics, a lot of alcoholics on our job. But I feel that we also have drug abusers. And I think the drug abusers, whether it's cocaine, we had an unfortunate incident a few years ago that was beyond cocaine. I don't want to get into that, but I worry about the officers, our brothers and sisters that are using any kind of substances to get through a day or to get through whatever. Now these pill poppers that we have, pill popping is so prevalent nowadays, even in our law enforcement community. What do you see relative to drug use and abuse in law enforcement?
I have seen a whole lot more people in the past year that have come for help, or their loved ones have reached out hoping that I could talk to their officer partner, specifically with alcohol or with illicit drugs. And usually when I confront it, it's like, listen, you smell like booze. Let's be honest with the fact that right now you're either leftover, hungover, or drunk. What'd you have to drink today? And just kind of calling a spade a spade. 9 times out of 10, people tell me it's the only way I can shut my brain off. And I get that because all human beings need a way to shut their brain off. But if that is the only way that you found that you can shut your brain off, we need to learn another way.
Yeah.
And in order to learn another way, we're going to have to also find a way to make this way not functional anymore, which a lot of times means treatment, which is a problem for law enforcement locally. And I get that because, would you want to go to any of our wonderful treatment facilities around here where who knows, maybe you locked up the person sitting in the chair next to you? No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't be honest. You wouldn't be able to fully engage. So I think all too often in my experience, we get people out of this local area in order to initiate that help with huge success.
So just for people that are watching, and maybe there's one of our brothers and sisters that does need help, you're able to get them that substance abuse and or alcohol, whatever kind of abuse it is, you're able to get them out of the area or region and move them somewhere safe where they feel comfortable, where the treatment will be more successful?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's nice to know.
And there are quite a few first responder specific programs, quite honestly. I have had the most luck, and actually someone's there now at a program in Maryland. Everybody that works there is a retired law enforcement or veteran, and everybody that goes there is law enforcement or veteran. So everybody there can understand the people sitting to their left and right.
Well, folks, we got a lot more to talk about with Dr. Butler. Stick with the Crime Dog podcast on the side. You won't be disappointed. Gold Shield Pro Services, we're your trusted residential and commercial inspection experts. Call us for one of our professional, nationally certified inspectors to make your real estate investments seamless. At Gold Shield Pro Services, we specialize in thorough inspections, providing you with insights you need to make informed decisions. From pre-sale, post-sale, or annual routine inspections, your number one asset is our top priority. Call 662-7725. That's 662-7725. Or visit us at goldshieldproservices.com to book your appointment today. Folks, welcome back to the Crime Dog podcast. Sitting on the couch tonight, Dr. Butler for the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. She's the director of health and wellness there. We've had some good conversations thus far. Doc, one of the things that we discussed on the break, and you made a very good point, is, the stigmatism of cops asking for help is a big enough hurdle to get over, but then going into the stereotypical sterile environment of, okay, come into my office, sit on my couch, lay down, let me get my notebook out. You had some interesting thoughts. What are your thoughts on the sterile environment that are traditional psychiatry or psychology?
So I do have an office at the sheriff's office and an office for Blue Line Wellness. Both kind of look like a living room, kind of like this. But I'm not in them very much. So I tell officers and deputies, I or we will see you anywhere but a bar. I will never see you over a drink to talk about what's going on. Never, ever. But whether it's walk in the park, walk your dog, sit in your living room. One person really had to talk, but he's a single dad and he had to go grocery shopping. I was like, I love Wegmans. So we walked the aisles at Wegmans together and talking about what was going on. And he was getting his grocery shopping done. I think it's important for two things if you're engaging with law enforcement. Not all clinicians are equipped to do this, quite honestly. One, I think whenever the phone rings, whether it's a Saturday, it's 2:00 in the morning, whenever it is, you got to talk then because they needed help a long time before they called you. And two, wherever it is that they're going to be comfortable talking to you, that's where you're going to do it. All too often, I found that it's kind of funny. People have wanted to sit car to car in their personal car, not their patrol car, which is kind of impersonal, right? But whatever, I'm willing to do that. So whatever it is where people want to walk, talk, sit, we're going to make it work.
That's big time. That's big time because when you talk about getting people help, one of the things that you also said, I was explaining how I'm a big fan of Rogan and how Rogan had a clinician on, and she was saying that sometimes therapy is great, but repeated therapy over and over does not help the person that's looking to get help. And you said some things about some people that come in, okay, I think we're past this point, but
yeah, I don't want to keep people sick, right? There is a time to lick your wounds and, live in your misery. For me, it's usually 1 to 2 conversations. I have OCD. I like to keep things moving. I had a fast-paced brain. So after 1 or 2 times, all right, so we've handled that, and we're not going to live in that misery anymore. How are we going to change it? What are we going to do? For folks to tell me that they don't like their life, they're out of shape, they want to get in better shape. Well, it's not going to do you any good sitting down talking to me about that. So instead, let's go walk or run, which you could do, and we'll talk while we're doing that. We have to make positive incremental changes. Allowing someone really to just sit and continue to kind of circle the drain, that's not helping them. Venting's helpful, but you can't live there.
This is coming from a doctor who you're going to do a triathlon, or you have done them? Ironman?
I've done many marathons. I want to do an Ironman triathlon, and I'm going to turn 50 next year. I know, I'm old. And I'm going to picking my favorite marathon to do. I think I found one in Nashville that I want to do next year.
That's wild. Speaking of exercise, David, you brought up a point on the break you want to talk about with the doctor about what the RPD has done. And she was saying that Todd Baxter has done the same thing at the sheriff's department.
Yeah. One of the things that I thought was positive in my career with RPD was that the availability of the working out when you're on duty. And some people, you tell people, oh, I worked out already today at work. And they're like, oh, you're so lucky. You have no idea. But I don't think people realize how great a stress release that is. For whether you're a detective or a road patrol guy, and the departments that encourage officers to take their lunch, it's not like you're skipping out. Like instead of taking a break or whatever, you call out and you're instead of eating your lunch at a diner or something, you're working out. And I think that is a great way to blow off steam and to release some of that tension. So it's commendable that RPD has that. But you were saying that MCSO now has them in all the substations.
Yeah. So in 2021, I did a survey when I came to the sheriff's office, and I know they laughed at me. No one's going to fill out a survey. Well, a bunch of people did. And one thing that a lot of them wanted were gyms. So there was a gym downtown in the public safety building, which is very helpful for folks in that building. Not so helpful if you're working in A, B, or C zone. So they had to get funders. County taxpayers can't pay for that, right? So they had to get funders. But now they're state-of-the-art gyms in all 3 locations. And folks can work out on duty. Again, you're on duty, right? You're ready if you get dispatched somewhere, but you're able to work out and talk about wringing out your sponge. Like I couldn't make it through my day if I didn't go to the gym before most people's eyeballs are opened. I wouldn't be any good to anybody. So it's huge. It's huge.
It's great.
I think an interesting point, not just to kind of circle back a little bit, but you talked about, when you don't spin your wheels, the people come, they have conversations, and you're looking for the next step. And I think I can't speak to the rest of the world. I can only speak to my profession, but I think cops in general are problem solvers, right? And they see an issue and they're 5 steps ahead of everybody else because they're thinking about how they're going to resolve this and put it to bed and move on to the next one. So I think when you said that kind of clicked, right? Because I'm like, that's how we think, right? It's like somebody's telling us about their issues and we're thinking in our head of 4 solutions and getting them down the road. And when you say that's how you work, that's probably cops, I would suspect, would respond well to that and identify with it because that's how kind of we're wired when we're, dealing with whatever it is at work.
Oh, absolutely. It's probably frustrating for my family. I can't complain about something unless I'm going to change it. If you're not going to change it, we're going to stop complaining about it because I can't listen to that. But realistically, keeping in mind that same cop needed help a long time before they called. They don't need to start when they were a child and what happened in the 4th grade. We need to start on why you picked up the phone today because you didn't pick up the phone yesterday. You picked up the phone today. What was different today? And try to figure out how we can make a positive change.
And that's what you're saying with your clinicians too, right, Doc? You're saying that if you tell the people that work for you, if you get a call, it's not, let me pencil you down for next Thursday. You said it. If they call today, they should have called 6 weeks ago, possibly, right?
Yep.
So you're saying if you're calling, let's get you the help that you need now.
Absolutely.
That's important for any of our brothers and sisters that are watching this, that if you have an issue, if there's an issue that you're dealing with, Dr. Butler and her staff and her company, Blue Line Wellness, they're not going to put you off 7 weeks from now and pencil you into the schedule. That's important for them to know because some people possibly could have been saved if they weren't penciled into a schedule somewhere, right?
Yep. My usual answer when someone says, are you busy? Are you working? It's like, yeah, where are you? Let's meet. Tim Hortons, Panera, your living room, the park, doesn't matter. Where are you? Let's meet right now. If they want to, clearly it's voluntary. But when they called, I want to meet them then.
Well, I was just going to say that seems to me kind of like an undersell, right? Because we all know you try to get in to see a doctor or whatever. I don't care what it is. It could be to try to get a haircut, and you're pushed 3 weeks down the road, right? So to say that your people are gonna take that call and are gonna have an actual conversation that time and that place, and not say call us back, a week from now and we'll pencil you in. I mean that nobody operates like that. So I mean that's impressive. That in and of itself is an impressive thing to know that if somebody's calling, you're gonna drop whatever it is and you're gonna address it and try to work through it. So
yeah. Last night my phone rang at 2:00 in the morning. That sponge analogy really resonates with folks. And so many times in the middle of the night, it's, hey, Doc, you free? Of course. What's up? Well, my sponge is full. Can you talk? Let's fucking ring it out, man. Let's ring it out. And by the end, and they're on duty working. And then sometimes you just need to vent. You just need to get out whatever's stressing you out so you can go about your day. Sometimes it's not as simple, but a lot of times it is. And in that moment, if you can be that sounding board for them to, quote, ring out their sponge, I don't know. Maybe we'll save more.
Well, we were talking about, David brought it up on the break. You said, geez, everyone, like you said, everyone's ringing out their sponges on you. And
yeah,
that's why.
Right in my head.
But that's why you have your coping mechanisms. You have your outlets.
I do. So I have a 13-year-old. He's my entire world. And I go to the gym bright and early. If I have my way, I'm there at like 3:45, 3:30 in the morning. No one else is there. It's great.
Go figure. Nobody else is there at 3:30. Who'd have thought?
Someone comes at 4, so it's not that long. That's my happy time. That's me time. And I think it's funny because law enforcement knows me well enough to know that now, where if my phone rings during me time, something's really popping off in that moment. And I'll answer it, of course. But I love it. It allows me to start the day as, really fresh and energized as I can.
Now, have you done that because you know that that's a time when you could actually have your me time? In other words, it doesn't sound like anyone's going to have me time after 7 a.m., 8 a.m. But did you perfectly carve out that time for you because you knew that you'd be able to get that decompression time in? Did you purposely schedule that early morning time for yourself because you knew that would be a way that you wouldn't get?
That's a good question. So years ago, probably 20, it was like 6:00 in the morning when usual gyms open. But then after I became a mom, I realized I had to do everything for me right here before the little guy woke up, and he wakes up early, I tell you what. So 3:30 seems like a good time to go.
That's awesome.
David's in all about 3:30.
Well, David's a 5 a.m.
guy, but 3:30 is just when you're getting phone calls at 2 a.m, your doc's not getting much sleep.
Yeah. I think a lot of folks have told me I may get, on a good night, 5 hours of sleep. Twice a week, it's a solid 8. And while I know I need to practice what I preach and get more sleep, I will own that. I am so energized and love what I do. And I feel like so many humans in this world go to work every day like a robot and do not enjoy what they do. I get excited to run out the door, whether that's 5 a.m, 6 a.m, middle of the night, whenever. So as long as I have that energy, I kind of just want to ride it.
Well, the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Baxter, all his staff, they're very lucky to have you, Doc. You were somebody that came along at the right time. I think our younger brothers and sisters are someone that are going to need you and your staff. Please keep up the good fight. You were definitely needed in our generation. Those services weren't there for people that we had that needed it, that we knew definitely needed it. We hope that other departments will utilize you and your Blue Line Wellness program. But folks, can't thank Dr. Butler enough from the Monroe County Sheriff's Director of Health and Wellness. It was a good time, Doc. We appreciate everything that you do. Folks,
thank you.
Stick with us. We got the crimedogpodcast.com. Go there for our library of episodes. It'll direct you to our YouTube page. Our YouTube channel is at Crime Dog Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, but check our library out on YouTube. Check out our library out on our website. We hope you stick with us for future episodes. But like my brother-in-law, Frankie Grassi, says, if you can't make it, who cares?